To the opposition. Thank you for joining us on the belated Hamilton leg of our now state-sanctioned Change Your Future bus tour from Cape Reinga to the Bluff. I'm James McDowell, candidate for Waikato, number 6 on the party list, spokesperson for Immigration and Foreign Affairs and your local ACT board member. Before we get started, we have some red tape to get through. So the bathrooms, there is one there, the men's, and the ladies is just on the other side over there. Appreciate if you can have your phones on silent, that's always nice. If there is a fire or some other emergency, then I'd suggest leaving the building using your nearest exit. That's what I shall do. Stairs that way, doors that way, windows if you're brave enough. If the lights suddenly go out and we're in total darkness, then if somebody could please contact Winston Peters because he might have forgotten to pay the power bill. So that would just be quite helpful. Thank you very much. Shocking, shocking. We have 10 candidates here tonight, unless any more snuck in. So in addition to myself, we've got Maya Deeman, Hamilton East, who's somewhere. I'll just go through them, otherwise we'll be here all night. Roger Weldon, Hamilton West. Simon Court, our environment spokesperson. We have Mark Cameron, our rural spokesperson from Northland. David Freeman for Taupo. Ada Shell for New Plymouth, Dave King from Port Waikato, Andy Parkins, Hutt South, who's actually the driver for our tour, logging up extensive mileage, awesome guy, and of course David Seymour, who you'll hear from very shortly. This election is the most important in a generation. We are 5 weeks out from election day, and early voting opens in 20 days on October 3rd. New Zealanders from all walks of life are turning to ACT as we put forward positive, critically thought out solutions to many of our challenges that we face. We're the only party with a comprehensive 5-point plan to restart the economy and repay the debt. We've not been afraid to develop innovative policies around welfare, health, mental health, the economy, foreign affairs, border protection, in a world that is still very much dealing with COVID-19, obviously, by the way we're all laid out tonight. Certain other parties are going back to their old tricks of a bygone era, populist policies, including pointless taxes to get their anti-capitalist supporters frothing at the minutes, buying votes for the public holiday, politicising the border, virtue signalling around energy, and overall promising very little because they know, hindsight, since the last election, that's about all they can deliver. This past term of government has seen many ups and downs. The ups include taxation, government debt, an increase in child poverty and material hardship, and the downs include Project Kiwi Build and other failed infrastructure projects such as light rail and the Provincial Growth Fund, also known as the Great Northland Gold Rush, an increase in gang violence, the diabolical rush firearm law changes and asset seizure that targeted the wrong people, and not to mention losing the bloody rugby to Australia. We're told that our response to COVID-19 is gold standard, yet here we are stranded, unable to bring back work visa holders who have their lives set up here or are stuck overseas, unable to welcome long-term international students. It's a massive market. Unable to bring in valuable workers, though the Labour Party has said if you vote for them, then maybe they'll let you do that. So apparently they're allowed to say that. We need to get smart with this pandemic. A plan that doesn't involve running for cover and still protects the health of New Zealanders. We need to look to our friends in Taiwan for inspiration, set up our own epidemic response unit like they've done in their country. We should allow alternative facilities for safe electronic monitoring, strict punishment for rule breakers, embrace cutting-edge technology. We need to not be afraid of looking at new ideas around quarantine for overseas arrivals. The party vote for ACT will lead to a smarter approach in dealing with this pandemic. Our current level of borrowing is totally unsustainable, and party leaders need to front up with their plans for getting on top of out-of-control spending and debt. We can either keep giving handouts, giving money to trendy businesses, sorry, lost my place, that was awful, or continue programs that don't work, or we can save billions so that future generations don't have to pay it back. We recently launched our Debt Destroyer website, so if you haven't had a look at that, I highly recommend going and have a look at that. It's www.debtdestroyer.nz, very useful. The reality is that Labour has been polling well, as we know, but whatever the outcome on 17th of October, we need a strong ACT holding them all accountable. So the message is simple. Party vote ACT. Spread the message to your friends, family, colleagues, and anyone else. Tell them not to waste their votes. Remember, a party needs either 5% or an electorate seat. We should have both. On issue after issue, ACT has stood on principle. We defended freedom and democracy when others wouldn't. A party vote for ACT is a vote for honest politics and a rejection of the scandals and sleaze. More than ever, we need more ACT MPs in Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. Please give a warm welcome to the most effective Member of Parliament in a long time, David Seymour.
Look, thank you very much, James. And well, geez, you've sort of used all the points I was going to make in the first 3 minutes, but I'll try and think of something else to say. I want to thank people that have come along. There's some people who have been to a lot of meetings. One of them is Olive. Now, Olive is 9, and Olive came, she's been to a few ACT meetings before, and she just told me that she's read my book from last election, Own Your Future. So if you don't want to be outsmarted by a 9-year-old, then you should also read my book, which conveniently is for sale. But when people say young people aren't interested in politics, I mean, it's about 180 pages. That's 20 pages for every year of Olive's life. So if she can do it, there's no excuse not to buy my book. I just thought I'd get that in there. And there's other people here who have come along to ACT meetings for the first time. Welcome. We're really grateful that people have become interested in our party and interested in our democracy. So thank you. The way that I try to do this is not to talk at you. You know, the stereotype of politicians is actually someone who can hold 2 gobstoppers in their mouth because they're always talking so much. But actually, there's a reason that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And that's because representation and representative democracy is actually about listening. So we're going to do this. I've joined the bus tour today, and I'm going all the way through to Invercargill on the bus and back up to Christchurch, and then a few other stop-offs I'm flying in and out of. So we're going to do this with literally thousands of people up and down New Zealand. And if you happen to be in another part of the country, then you can actually check out on the events section of our website where all our other events are too. So lots to get through, but let me just start with 3 basic ideas that might get some of the discussion started. I think whoever wins this election, and we can talk a bit about the likelihood of different people winning later if you like, is going to have to deal with, in my view, 3 big issues. The first is getting more aggressive on the public health response. The second is being honest about the debt that this government is taking on. And the third is actually capitalising on our newfound status as an island nation on a pandemic planet. Because for all the history of our country, our isolation's been a drawback. In a world that may go on for several years with epidemics, isolation suddenly become a strength if we're prepared to capitalise on it. So let's just work through those. You know, I get increasingly annoyed when they say we went hard and went early. You know, it took 182 days to start testing people working at managed isolation facilities. Now, just focus on this for a moment. The only people in New Zealand that we knew had COVID-19 were the ones that had got off the plane from a country where they had it. This was during the months and months that New Zealand had eliminated it. And the only people that we knew were exposed to those people that had it were the people working in managed isolation facilities. Now, if you were in charge of running this show, who would you test? Well, if it was me, I'd test those people. And can you believe that all the way along, the government did not have a policy of requiring them to be tested? And when asked, the Minister of Health said, well, testing people's a pretty big lever to pull. What, so putting the whole country into a level 2 lockdown for a month is not a big lever to pull? I mean, come on. And it's not just doing the basic stuff right that matters. It's actually managing to do better than anyone, or at least be up with the front runners. Because you notice something about the attitude that we get. It's always count yourself lucky, sunshine. Be lucky you're not Sweden. Be lucky you're not Victoria. Well, hang on. Now, I don't claim to be a geographical genius, but as far as I'm aware, there's 6 other states and 2 other territories in Australia that are doing quite well. Why does the government always compare us to the one Australian state that's not? We've got to raise our expectations here. And what about Taiwan? What about Singapore? You know, in my view, we should actually compare ourselves with the best in the world, not constantly congratulate ourselves because we're not the worst. It's a question of attitude. It's a question of being aggressive about the public health response. And why do we need to do that? Because people in business are saying, I could understand the first one to save lives when things were uncertain and we didn't know how bad it could be. I can maybe accept this second lockdown, but I cannot afford a future where elimination depends on lockdowns. You know, we need to be able to achieve and maintain the elimination strategy without continued lockdowns. That's the objective. And you know, the second thing we've got to do is actually safely reconnect with the world. And in case you think this is some crazy right-wing scheme, you know, the people that agree with this are people like David Seymour and Helen Clark. You know, I mean, what sort of issues bring David Seymour and Helen Clark together? Well, end-of-life choice, which we can talk about if people want, and safely reconnecting with the world. There's too many people in too many sectors that depend on those international connections. I'll give you an example. I was talking to some folks that run a fishing company, and they said, look, most of the people are Kiwis. They're onshore, they're processing the fish, they're marketing it, distributing it, doing the accounting, and all of that stuff. But of course, someone has to actually go out on the boats to catch the fish, or our business doesn't work that well. And those people tend to be Russians. I said, well, why are they Russians? Why don't you just get someone off the dock, you put them on the boat? They said, you've got to be kidding. You get an untrained person off the winds list, put them on a boat and send them to the Southern Ocean for 3 months? I said, yeah, give it a go. And they said, well, the problem is that all the instructions on the boat are written in Russian. I said, well, have you checked if anyone can speak Russian on the dole? Anyway, it turns out they can't. Now, if they can't get, you know, a fresh crew in every now and then that fishing expedition stops, and those jobs on the shore get lost. So the first thing we're going to have to do is ask, how have the best done it? How do the Taiwanese do it? And how can we do it better? And just to make sure that I'm not just someone that complains, on our website, ACT's Wellbeing Approach to COVID-19 says we should balance all of the costs and benefits, acknowledge lockdowns aren't sustainable, ask the Taiwanese how they did it. They managed no lockdowns and only 7 deaths. So they did 12 times better than us with no lockdowns in terms of deaths per head of population. And it lays out the points that you should make, and that's on our website. But the second big issue that I think whoever is elected is going to have to deal with is having an honest conversation about the indebtedness of our country, particularly the public debt that's been run up under this government. And I tell you the strangest thing, I've started to get younger and younger people coming to my meetings, like Olive. You know, I've had toddlers come to my meetings, and I think it's because they're worried about the debt. You know, I'm only half joking. Some of you may know, hopefully you don't, but you may know that I had a short, but not that short, career as a celebrity dancer. As a result, I have the 3rd largest following on Instagram of any member of parliament. Only problem is the average age of my followers is 14 and the voting age is 18. So next election we're going to be close. But you know, they've started messaging me recently things like, David, who's the government borrowing all this money from and who has to pay it back? Now these kids didn't follow me for politics, they followed me for dancing, but they know something's up. And now when the government's borrowed 140 billion, we're going to have an honest conversation about, can we afford all the spending we used to do? And we've actually created a tool where you can play with this yourself, because we need to start people actually accepting what's going on. It's called debtdestroyer.nz. And you can go on and you can work out which spending you want to keep and see what effect that has on paying off debt over the next decade. Because frankly, to put debt on these guys who have very little knowledge, well, Olive probably does know because she read my book, but you know, most kids who are 9 have no idea what's happening with this particular issue. They certainly have no control over it, and to lump them with debt, that means in 10 years' time they're going to pay higher taxes or have less services from government because of decisions we're making on their behalf now, in my view, amounts to fiscal child abuse. And we've got to have a much more honest conversation. Now, I know there are people out there who say, oh, don't worry, interest rates are low, money's practically free, so just borrow away. How many people who've studied human history think that it's sustainable to just borrow money and assume it's going to be free and there'll never be any consequences? Because I don't think that's vaguely credible. So we're going to have to start being honest about our spending. And by the way, Labor's tiny envy tax will make almost no impact on debt. It is all about signalling that the Labor Party is quite happy to pick on a minority of people so long as they have a high income. That's okay. So dealing with debt is going to be a major issue, and debt destroyer is our answer to that. But finally, the question, I think, is how do we take advantage of the enormous opportunity of being an island nation on a pandemic planet? Because that gives us opportunities and choices that continental countries do not have. You know that great song, Aotearoa, rugged individuals at the bottom of the world, the tyranny of distance, 6 months in a leaky boat. You know, Billy Connolly said, yeah, still on the live stream, aren't we? You guys, hi. You know, you guys are closer to the moon than you are to Melbourne. You know, being so far away from markets, from investment, from customers, from skilled labour, you know, being far away has, for all of New Zealand's history, been our greatest drawback. But all of a sudden, being an isolated island nation, when we're going to face pandemics for years to come, I predict, is an enormous advantage if we make the right choices. But we've got to start making smart choices. You know, you look at the regulations and our hostility to people being able to do basic things. You know, Mark Cameron is our number 8 candidate. He's a rural dairy farmer. He will tell you that the farming community are the greatest environmentalists in New Zealand. And people say, oh, surely farmers just exploit the land. No, they don't. Farmers make their livelihood off the land. They care more about preserving it than people who don't own it. It's just human nature. And yet they never get the credit for the conservation they do, for the riparian planting, for the fencing, for the new techniques to reduce their fertiliser wastage. They just get constantly beaten up with more regulation. And Simon Court, he's our number 5 candidate. Now, he's a reformed Green voter, and we're big on redemption in the ACT Party. But what Simon will tell you is he's been a civil engineer for 25 years. He's worked in Europe, you know, he's worked in Fiji. He's worked in really dangerous environments, such as the Auckland Council. And the one thing he's learned as a civil engineer dealing with waste and wastewater and waste management for 25 years as a professional engineer is that he actually is restrained from innovating by regulation. We don't have a shortage of regulation when it comes to fighting environmental problems. We have a shortage of innovation. And let me just give you one of Simon's examples. We set a goal in the year 2000 of 0 waste to landfill. Today, waste to landfill is up 40% each year since we declared a goal of 0. And the interesting thing is it's not a surprise because the regulations say, and it's actually written down, that the only way to dispose of rubbish in New Zealand is to bury it in the ground. In Denmark, they use waste to energy, burn it at super high temperatures, and actually get free energy out of burning waste with no emissions, or no dangerous emissions, because they're doing it in Copenhagen, in the middle of a major city. We made that technology illegal. We've got too much regulation, not enough innovation, and the regulation stopping the innovation. I could go through all our candidates and they could all give you examples of where we are actually hostile to people making a go of it and building our recovery. And I could give you a few more. You know, we are one of the most difficult places in the world to actually send free money to. Now, let me tell you about foreign investment. Some people Probably not here, but some people don't like foreigners. Personally, I think foreigners are great. But if you don't like foreigners, then foreign investment is for you. You see, immigration is where foreigners come and live next door to you. Foreign investment is where they stay home and just send you money. So you should love it. And if you like foreigners and you like money, it's just all win-win. But we in New Zealand are ranked the 4th hardest country in the world to send investment to. And at the same time, we need to strengthen our connections with democratic countries worldwide. So the ACT Party says, in our 5-point plan for economic recovery, if your investment originates from a friendly democratic country, your Japans or your South Koreas or your Belgiums or your Canadas, then actually you're a friend and you can invest here with lower restrictions than other places. That gets us capital and it strengthens our connections with other democracies around the world. And I think that is something that we should be doing to make sure the next generation is more likely to have good jobs. But then let's talk about our Resource Management Act. Now, I know you don't have a lot of sympathy for us Aucklanders, but surely you don't think we should die of thirst. And yet, you've got this river down here, which has 400 cubic metres a second pouring into the Tasman Sea, which is also not short of water. One of the things I noticed when I last was allowed to fly to Sydney. And it took us 8 years to get permission to bring a relatively small amount of water out of the river up to Auckland, where we are parched. Now you think about that, the Auckland Council is a $1 billion organisation that issues resource consents in its own right. And it took 8 years to get halfway up the list to get permission to do something vital. What chance do the next generation have of building a home if the Auckland Council can't get a vital consent? I look at Tiwai Point. You couldn't build it today. It'd never be allowed under today's environmental regulations. And yet, it produces some of the most environmentally friendly aluminium in the world. So if it closes, the net effect will be that the people of the world will consume aluminium that is made in less environmentally friendly ways. And yet we've made regulations that say you couldn't build it here today. So foreign direct investment from friendly countries, resource management law reform, and then you come to taxes. We need to actually stop spending money by giving it out to someone with a green school or AJ Hackett with his bungee jump, and just say, if we want to boost the economy for a year, we're going to cut GST from 15 down to 10. And if we're prepared to do that, then we could actually get $6 billion extra circulating in the economy and not a single photo op for a politician. I don't mind, because I'm not as photogenic as some politicians. But that's the kind of policy to stimulate the economy that, in our view, we need. All of this is laid out in our 5-point plan to rebuild the economy. And so you see each of these points, public health, it's our wellbeing approach. Debt, it's our debt destroyer. Economic reboot, this is in our 5-point plan. Everything that we do is set up in order that if you are interested in actually what our solutions and our alternatives are, you can easily find it online. So those are just a few starting thoughts. But like I say, I'll try not to go on at you. I could talk all day about end-of-life choice and free speech and firearm laws and, charter schools, things where ACT has taken a stand and made a difference. But I'll leave it there for now and let people raise in questions any issues that they may have. Thank you so much for listening so far, and I look forward to the discussion.